Hello, how's it going? I'm super excited to hop on here. It's been a little while. And today I'm interviewing a dear friend who's an amazing author and writer, and she just has incredible works as far as mindfulness, meditation, and her story is really profound. And her journey and just her struggle and her healing. So I'm really excited. It looks like she's popping on now. So um, Laura's gonna hop on. Hi!
Hi!
Yay!
It's so good to see you.
Oh my God, it's been too long.
I know. How's life? How are you?
I'm really, really good. I'm just so happy to see you. How
Likewise. Good. Yeah, we're slipping into winter here in Colorado and getting accustomed to all the changes that come with that. It's very exciting.
Yay! Are you excited for the snow?
I am. Yeah, the mountains are dusted. The other morning, I love waking up when the clouds clear and it almost looks like they've just been spray painted with this white, and it's just magical. So the skis are coming out, starting to get my legs ready.
I'm excited for you. Are you and Adrian gonna go in the mornings? I know that you've been getting up and stuff in the past.
Yeah, it's a really good routine to go early, hike uphill and then ski down and come back and start work. It's kind of feels like you get a second day just in that morning session.
It's true. Wait a day. I love it. Oh, well, thank you so much for coming on here. I was just saying how excited I am to connect with you, and just share a little bit of what you're up to because you're very inspiring. And I'm
Mm.
actually reading your book right now, and I am savoring it. It is so beautiful. I'm still in the beginning parts, and I'm finding that I'm just slowing down and like, oh,
Mm.
I'm gonna take this all in because there's so much there, not only in your personal story and what you're sharing, but also in the keys and the insights, just like the layering of it, of your process. Like I've gotten chills. I've
Mm.
teared up. I've just like felt deep empathy. I've smiled. I felt joy. I've laughed. Like all of the things in a very short amount of time. And I just love your writing style as well. So wanted to pop on here today and say thank you. And I'm so excited to continue reading and just wanted to hear a little bit about your inspiration as a writer.
Hmm. Well, thank you. That is it's so lovely to hear and so sweet. I really appreciate you asking me to come on and share. I was just, reflect. It's an interesting thing when you write a book and you share it with the world because it becomes kind of this snapshot in time in terms of how you relate to either this story or these concepts or these things that have shaped who you are. But the truth is that you continue to evolve. And what I actually love about it is that I can now look back on this book with the lens of myself evolving. And one thing I thought of the other day was that, as you know, some of these chapters, this is the book, it's called The Magic of Well-Being. Some of the chapters are really short. They're either just like, and they're not even really chapters, they're kind of just like little sections. Some are a couple pages, some are half a page. And the idea that I thought of the other day was that because I wanted it to feel accessible, I wanted it to feel easeful and to be almost like this companion that we can kind of pop in and pop out of. And it doesn't necessarily, it does kind of build on itself, it's designed to, but you don't need to hold what you've read before in order to understand what's going on now. And looking at all that space, all that blank space on the page, I thought I've tried to incorporate silence in this as well, so that no matter what experience you have on each page and what it evokes, there is that space to digest, to sit with, to kind of have the companion of silence even, and have it be something gentle and something friendly rather than something frightening or unfamiliar.
Oh my gosh, I feel that. That's
Mm.
amazing that you intentionally did that. And I really am experiencing that and reading it. So, yeah, beautiful. You're such a talented writer and have a beautiful expressing and holding space. So, I didn't
Mm.
really intentions. I love that. I feel that.
Thank you. And that, like, the gentleness too. I think what you find when you write a book, in some ways, it's for your own. It's kind of the selfish thing, as well as, meaning to be something that might connect with other people. But I really wanted to create something gentle. One thing that I found in my own journey with myself is that there's been so much harshness at times, so many high standards, so many judgments, so many expectations. And a lot of my practice and my personal growth has been moving into this space of gentleness. I felt like I wanted to capture that in these bound pages of something that you can come to it and just be who you are, whether you're bringing something super messy or you're bringing something confusing or you're bringing like the depths of darkness that you haven't even excavated down yet. Like, it's all welcome, and it's this gentle container to hold all of that. And I feel like I need that as much as in my life as I wanted to offer it as well.
Oh my God. How amazing that we can go to a book to feel that, just to feel acceptance, to feel understood, to feel acknowledged. That's amazing.
Oh, thanks. I hope so. That's always the goal, and then you sort of hope it translates. So I'm glad it does for you.
Absolutely. I'm loving it.
Mm.
I'm excited to keep diving into it. And
Oh,
how did you first get into writing?
stories have always been such a large part of my life. They, in some ways, were the safe space for me. I think I have that familiar relationship with books. When I was growing up, there were a lot of tumultuous things happening in my family and in my own understanding of who I was and how I could kind of make it in the world, was in some ways to retreat to places of possibility and to places of safety and to places that let me know that there were ways, kind of the hero's journey. There were ways to move through life, no matter what was coming at you, that were transformative. And I think that stories and imagination, the quality of being able to imagine a reality that doesn't exist, have always kind of felt very integral to who I am and to how I've kind of moved through the world. And then in high school, very practically, I was into speech and theater. And so I loved the embodiment of storytelling as well. And I loved the dynamic between being on stage or in a speech tournament and the audience, and the ways in which people could be moved, they could be transported, they could experience parts of themselves through what you were conveying that was at just enough of a distance that they could touch that part. It wasn't necessarily as threatening as diving in deeply. And so for me, and as you know, and I'm happy to share, I had a really difficult and traumatic thing happen in my life. I was a senior in college, and I had an older brother who was my only sibling, and we had an incredibly, I think, unique sibling dynamic in that we were really close. He was, the way that I kind of describe it to myself is he was my gravity at that time in my life. I felt myself kind of orbit and orient around him, and I felt really safe with him the way that I did with stories. And he died. He was lost to suicide and mental illness. And it was a really earth-shattering thing for me at that time to have that gravity ripped away and to suddenly feel untethered, unbound, confused, and really lost in terms of who I was and how I was supposed to process this thing in my life. I found myself turning to this resource of stories and storytelling, both reading and taking refuge in stories, but also taking refuge in telling them. And for me, that was the start of really earnestly writing. I had always been somebody who wrote for my own personal pleasure and enjoyment. And it became a little bit more systematic because I had something to work with. I had something that I needed to integrate into my life, you know, or not, or look at the edges where I couldn't, and just figure out a way to relate to it. And in some ways to claim it as mine, as opposed to something that was going to pull me around in a way that was maybe harmful, or kept me from really sinking into this deeper level of myself. So at that time, shortly after my brother died, I started writing my memoir, which, full transparency, I'm still working on that book. It's been like 8 years, and it's awesome, and it's its own thing. And what I found was this kind of journey of exploration and self-healing through storytelling. Today, I work as a professional editor and a ghostwriter because I love helping other people also tell their stories. Obviously, I'm working on books because I love sharing mine. And then also through speaking and performances, I've kind of found a way to bring back in that theatrical element of embodying stories and engaging with an audience and having discussions around grief and loss and growth and transformation and the hard edges of ourselves that we try to make peace with. So I feel like I kind of don't exist independently of stories now. There's a real commingling that's happened, and any way that I can kind of find to chart new territory through stories is always an exciting thing for me.
Wow. Wow. That's powerful. It's story medicine. I mean,
Yeah.
finding healing through our stories, finding healing through sharing our stories, finding healing through listening to other people's stories and allowing them to share. I mean, I feel like it's almost a deeply kind of missing piece of culture, of modern, where that kind of has throughout history been integrated as such an integral part of our own growth and self-development and kind of rite of passage even. And I love that you're bringing it back and that you're weaving it in, and then that you're others to share their stories, because you do have such an eloquent way of speaking, of writing, of what you were saying, bringing that non-existent into the existence. And so
There
I
was this beautiful analogy that I heard recently. I love an author and poet who he's passed, but his name was John O'Donohue. And he talks in some ways about, kind of talks about Celtic wisdom. And he also talks about these thresholds that we inhabit in our lives. If we think about it, you know, generationally, if we have children, we are the threshold between the past and the future. And he also talks about the threshold between the inner world that we inhabit, that nobody else can fully know, can fully understand, and this external world in which we are engaging and never a part of. And yet sometimes there feels like this interplay, at times this disconnect, at times this loneliness, and that language and our expression and our storytelling is our attempt to kind of build a bridge between these two worlds, the inner world, the outer world, and to stand at this threshold and to kind of, you know, own it and share it in a way. The thing that I find about storytelling as well, and this, when I gave my TEDx talk, which was about grief and about the loss of my brother, and I did a one-woman performance and traveled around the country doing it about his loss, and I spoke about that performance in my TEDx talk. And the main message that I wanted to get across is that in a lot of these intimate human experiences, we feel alone. We feel isolated. That internal experience is so saturated and at times so difficult and overwhelming. And yet it's not always mirrored, you know, in the external world. And that disconnect can feel heartbreaking. And I just wanted to share with people that even though we might have our own individual experiences with grief, we might have grief around a variety of different things in our lives. It's not just losing a person, it's losing a dream, it's losing a relationship. It's kind of waking up one day and realizing that, like, oh, my life isn't what I thought it was going to be or what I've wanted it to be. It's the grief of all the times we didn't show up for ourselves. Everybody kind of resonates with different things that elicit grief, which is a very human emotion. And yet the experience of grief is something that unites us. We do all have that. And even though it can seem shameful or something that we should keep tucked in the dark corners of our lives. It's actually this shared threshold that we all know. And I do think that storytelling is a powerful way to reveal to people you're not alone, as well as to, of course, educate, share experiences that we don't know, and then also take an empowered stance in writing the narrative of your life. If you write a nonfiction book about yourself, so easily, I think it can feel as if life writes stories for us. If we fall on our default lenses of how we see our lives, whether that's, seeing things from a victim perspective or from resistance of what's happening, but instead to turn towards those experiences and ask, how can I engage with this differently? How can I leverage this imaginative, creative quality to reshape how I relate to my own life? It's really transformative to experience, and then also to work with people and to see them embody that power of story.
Wow. It's like a superpower.
Yeah, ordinary superpowers. That's why, even though I included the word magic in the title, I kind of battled with it a little bit, because magic implies something extraordinary, something kind of out of the ordinary. And as you read in the intro, I don't know if I did a great job, but what I wanted to get across was basically ordinary magic. Adrian, my husband, and I were just on a walk this morning, and we were looking at these ice crystals that had formed at the edge of a lake. And there was this feeling of magic. These reeds had dipped down into the water and pulled up all night long, getting just little bits of ice until they had these little skirts. It was miraculous. These little skirts, rings of ice around these reeds. And there was that feeling of, kind of ordinary magic. When I wake up to my life as it's happening right now, with nothing altered, how can I actually find magic in letting go of anger, or in even feeling anger, things that we are so quick to judge as not being a part of what our life should be or what we want it to be, are actually, I think, gateways and doorways into deep appreciation and gratitude for life. And that to me is pretty magical. A superpower, as you said.
I would agree. It's gratitude in and of itself. Is really magical. And when you can transmute or transform, really things that we do all experience, really tough emotions or losses or whatever it may be. But as you were saying, that unifying force of grief, where it connects us and it helps us to have empathy for each other and understand each other and relate to each other and understand ourselves better. And it's kind of like, yeah, we wouldn't even understand gratitude if we didn't experience those depths, those challenges, which really are what make us who we are, I feel. It's that great quote, it's not how it's not if you fall down, it's how you come up. And kind of what you're saying is how you come up transformed. Experience.
Yeah, I love that aspect too of the marriage between, loss and life, grief and wonder, life and death. I really felt for myself, Scott, my brother, his death and his loss was, I've had a very privileged life, and I hadn't really experienced anything disruptive in my life. And that was something that kind of shattered the illusion of control that I had over things, and the illusion of permanence in some ways too. And I really grappled with, and I think even when we wake up to it, we continue to work with it and relate with it. This idea of impermanence, of the only constant is change. And I actually think it's interesting. I don't have much jewelry, but some of the things I do have skulls on them, because I actually feel like when I carry death close to me, it helps me wake up to my life. I'm take much more responsibility for things as they are, not as I wish that they would be, whether that's myself or the circumstances around me. And I can actually find gratitude in a real penetrating way when I remember death and that there is an end. And it might seem a little bit macabre and morose, but I think that we forget that to our detriment sometimes. It's easy to feel invincible, but I think it's a little bit of a false bottom, because when things happen in life, like Scott's death for my story, it's a very jarring wake up. And for me, I really felt at that moment, um, you either need to, really learn something here and go in deep, or you're going to miss a big opportunity, that I hope is never afforded to you again. That kind of thing. Like I had to find a new way forward that didn't quite feel like a choice. It felt like a necessity of there's something here that I've been offered, and I need to pay attention to it, because it's really, really important.
Mm, wow. Yeah, that's amazing that you were able to come to that realization and conclusion. Even
And I certainly didn't do it alone. Like, I've had so much support and so many incredible people around me. I think that that's another aspect of this, especially when we're working with grief. We're actually not supposed to do this journey alone. We're not designed to. We have associated strength with this stalwart independence. And I think that strength is being able to open our hand and reach it out to somebody who either needs to take it, or who we need to take it to hold us close. And at the end of my TED talk, I gave kind of three. It's really hard when somebody is struck with grief and they're struggling to know what to do. You always want to know, like, what should I say? What should I do? And the three things that I suggested were to say, I don't know what to say right now, but I want you to know that I'm here. And I just want to be here with you right now. And if you want, please tell me your story. And assuring people that this is not a sign of brokenness. And I'm not going to turn away from this pain that you're experiencing, because sometimes we just need somebody to sit with us and face that pain together, because it's too big for one person. We need to circle the wagons and put our arms around each other, which I so miss in these COVID days, but with people with whom we have that ability to do so. And there's a lot of grief right now. I've been feeling it. I think a lot of people have been feeling it, this kind of global grief, the societal grief, and it maybe brings up or reaches back into our past and grabs our personal griefs and brings them forwards. And I think it's a lot to sit with right now.
Oh my gosh, it's such unknown times, transformational times, and definitely isolating times for people. Yeah, wow. Those are all such nuggets, all of just just like sitting in them. And what I think you bring forth is that because you didn't run away from your grief, you're like, okay, I'm going to face it, I'm going to process it, I'm going to feel it. It allows people to feel their own grief around you and feel safe and to experience and process. I think probably everyone has things that they've hidden or walked away from or just like haven't fully processed. I mean, everyone does. Like, we live in a society where we're constantly bombarded with distractions, with our cell phone, with, TVs, with politics, with this, even food, like comfort foods. Like, we're just constantly in this space of almost suppressing or numbing or being in comfort. And so being able to even sit in this conversation with you and just feel and experience the depths that you've been to in your own body, in your own mind, in your own journey, I feel like opens up such an allowance for others to be human, right?
Mm-hmm.
Wow, I've been through this. We're going through this. You're going through this. Like, I hear you. I feel you. I see you. I'm going to sit with you. Like, that is so healing in these times.
It is that for me during all the pandemic and the racial tensions and everything that's kind of come to the forefront politically as well, environmentally, the thing that I have found to be most stabilizing is a weekly meditation group that I'm a part of. And we don't even sit and meditate. It's, people just come forward to just talk about a little sliver of something that they're struggling with. And I feel such a relief. Somebody the other day in the group said, I don't want to hate. And what do I do with this part of me that hates? And I
Mm.
just felt this mirror of myself reflected, and anything that anybody brings forward, there is something really healing both, I think, in an example. And I've been so fortunate to have many examples of people leaning into their lives as opposed to escaping, which isn't to say I do it all the time. I escape, plenty. And I think that there can be real safety in escaping, and the titration that has to happen in our body. We can only take so much at a time before our body has to whoa, Nelly, pull back and dilute. I even found for myself this year that my own grief was really surfacing, and it took me a while to even name it, to realize oh no, this is grief. And I felt like I was right back there when I got the call from my dad that my brother was in the hospital. It was, and it, even that can sometimes bring up judgment. I should be beyond this. It's been so many years. I've done so much work. And letting those be as well, letting them arise, like nice little bubbles, and then just float away, maybe pop. Or that those are welcome too. The judgments are welcome, the strife is welcome. One thing I talk about in the book, and you'll know this from this beautiful town of Salida, Colorado, we have the Arkansas River running through town. I love going down to the river and sitting beside it and watching it over the seasons. Sometimes after the snow has melted, there is this deluge of water, and there are giant logs floating down, and there are dams that are built, and debris everywhere. And then right now at the start of winter, it's just it's very mellow. It's kind of this little trickle. All these rocks are revealed that you can't see otherwise. And I thought, the river is sort of like our life experiences. We can't always control what flows through. It has its own seasonality. It brings a lot of obstacles and sharp, pointy, heavy things that kind of knock us in the head. But what's bigger than the river? And the idea came of the riverbed. The riverbed is like this container that holds the river. And in those times when we do feel like so much is happening, it actually helps to not fully pull away necessarily, but to remember that there's something larger that holds us. I think for me, and especially, there's this feeling of I need to fix things, and I need to take action, and I need to do things right away. And that sometimes limits me down to a self that gets easily overwhelmed, easily anxious, easily burnt out. But if I stop floating down the river with all of its bumpy rapids, and I instead embody the river bed, it can hold anything, and it can remain, in this kind of peaceful strength position. Easier said than done, but I loved that imagery of bringing in nature, which I think has so many lessons and can make a visual inspiration for something that we feel inside. So I even remember for myself when I feel overwhelmed, it's all right, just step back, just be the riverbed. You were held by something so much greater, and when in doubt, call a friend and unload.
Absolutely. Wow. I love that. There's such grounding and presence in your words and in that message. And I feel that too sometimes, where it's just there's so much going on and so much I want to do and support. And it can be ungrounding. So even just that visual of going into the riverbed and being held, and that's real. That's where the real work is too. That's where that presence is. That's where we're going to have a larger impact, is when we're grounded and connected to each other, and to that deeper, just the moment, just being present in that moment.
There's this great quote that my teacher says, that I've been thinking of so often recently. He may have gotten it from somewhere else, so I apologize if I misattribute it. But he says, there are no circumstances under which it is wise to resist your life. Remembering that, when I feel all sorts of intense, suffering laden emotions, there are no circumstances under which it is wise to resist your life. And then the question is, so how do I engage with this? So how do I not resist, but not be completely overwhelmed by all of the emotions and all the experiences? With grief in particular, I think that is a very common fear, if I open myself up to the depths of this pain, I'll never come back. I'll never be able to recover. And I really felt that as well. You know, I've learned to turn towards my grief, but it wasn't that way from the start. I physically ran to the other side of the world from the United States to New Zealand. 2 weeks after my brother died, I moved to New Zealand because my aversion to that reality was so strong. I was incredibly privileged to be able to move there. I had become the inheritor of my brother's estate. I wasn't really thinking wisely about like money management. So I bought a ticket to New Zealand and really began this journey of realizing that life kept bringing my reality back to me. There was no place I could run to outrun what my reality was at that time. And yet there's a skillful way to engage with it too. And it's not even something that needs to be fixed. I think that was another big thing with grief, and I still remind myself of to this day. There's nothing broken. There's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing that needs to be fixed. There is just something that feels so tender at times, angry at times, you know, rageful at times. And I almost imagine it. I obviously love using my imagination. I imagine it as this little version of myself. I call her little Laura. And she is so overwhelmed by life, and she doesn't know how to engage with it, and she doesn't have the tools. And I just imagine myself holding her in those moments. I don't know the right answer either, but I can tell her, I'm not going to abandon you. I'm not going to leave you. I'm going to be here with you. And together we can face this. And it seems so simple, and yet so challenging, of course, at times as well, too, when our emotions feel like they want to be, you know, big and outward, to actually be able to settle and rest inward. And again, when we can't access that, honestly, calling friends it's like is one of the best things, because they'll be there to help us hold that reality that's just too big for that moment.
Absolutely. Thank God for community.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's so important that we learn how to lean on each other. I mean, when I was going through probably one of the biggest challenges in my life, just being able to ask for help was like an unknown for me, like an impossible. Like, what? Wait, how do you do that? You know, like just learning how to ask for help or how to lean in on each other or to show our vulnerabilities or be like, okay, I'm not okay right now. I'm really struggling, whatever it is. Like that is such a strength. Our vulnerabilities are such a gift. And there's so much in there and so much wisdom. And like you're saying, you really saw this, you really processed this as like, okay, what else is here? What else can I learn? Where is this journey taking me? And I feel you have so much embodied wisdom to share from your experience and from really going in and feeling it all and not running away from it. And I just feel like you're such an incredible resource to the community, and just like in your voice and your storytelling and your sharing of, again, how can we be more present? How can we be more human? How can we move through challenging times together?
Thank you, friend. And I want to honor also that what you said that I so relate to, and I think a lot of people do, in terms of asking for help, especially being an extremely competent, responsible, you know, get her done human, how hard that is. And the thing that I found for myself when I kind of, you know, realized I can't do this by myself anymore, was that one of the barriers was I didn't even know what I needed. So when we think of asking for help, we sometimes feel like, you know, it needs to be clear. I need help moving this couch to my new flat. But when it comes to the emotional experience of being human, often when we're in it, really in it, even we don't know what we need. And I think that what you're saying in terms of community is so critical, with this layer of people who won't turn away from you, no matter what you bring to the table. They can also hold human you, the human you that is full of so many emotions and experiences, and so much confusion. And for me, what I'll say is, and I'll say this to friends or even my husband, I don't know what I need right now, but I just want you to be with me. Please just be with me. Can I just, either share some things with you that I know aren't true, but I just need to get off my chest? Or can you just hold me while I'm crying? And I think that witnessing, you mentioned earlier, this feeling of feeling seen and heard and chosen. These are the three unconscious questions we ask in every single interaction. Do you see me? Do you hear me? Do you choose me just as I am? And I think we all know what it's like for those answers to be no. How gutting it is for somebody to, they're not seeing you, or they're not hearing your words, or they don't choose you. There's this subtle turning away that makes you feel shameful, that they're not going to witness who you are in this expression of your life. And it is very special, and certainly takes a lot of work, and I think also necessary to have people in our lives when those answers are yes. And even one person who can say, yes, I see you, yes, I hear you, yes, I choose you, they're not necessarily going to be there all the time. That's something I've certainly found out in marriage. There are times when my husband can be there for me, and there are times when he can't. And that's why I have the list of all the other people to call. But on that fundamental level, to know that you are okay as a human, you are worthy, and you belong here, is so critical. And it's something I think through I'm 31, but I imagine for the rest of my life, I will be, working on believing that, because there are certain, we slip in and out of it. Amnesia is part of being human as well. And then we have the beautiful gift of remembering, oh yeah, I remember what it feels like to belong. I remember what it feels like to be worthy. I also remember what it feels like to have those voices in my head that are so critical, that will tell me I'm the worst human being in history. And all of that can exist inside of the experience of being human. And something so courageous and brave and necessary is to reveal that to somebody and to say, I get you. I know.
Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's powerful. I'm gonna write that on here. Well,
If you could see, I've got so many like pieces of paper on my wall that are just, filled with these things. Again, the amnesia. I need little reminders.
constant reminders and constant like reminders to just tune into that.
Mm.
And I think somewhere where I've been really, really lucky and blessed in my life is I grew up in the sweetest little community in Colorado, in Crested Butte, Colorado. And we were basically a village, like we held each other. And I always say the land raised me. Like it's super wild, beautiful, still one of the prettiest places to me. And those mountains, those trees, like they made me feel at home. They made me feel a sense of belonging and safe. Like, I even joke around today because like I'll go into places where people maybe hold more fears or skepticisms, and I come in just with this innate, inherent trust because of that belonging, that connection to our environment, to our place. And I think that that's something that we've either lost or haven't had the privilege to experience on so many levels. Where do people actually feel at home and connected to place? Because that is such a mirror and a reminder of like being at home in our own bodies. And so I think, and I feel for, like Native Americans who were moved away from their place of being, their stories, their connection, their food, their memories. All of it is contained in that place. Their healing, their medicine, their rites of passage. Like it's just so really traumatic to be uprooted out of your place. Because I do think that that's where we kind of find our own trust in ourselves and peace and connection. And then we can translate that into our relationships and into our work or into whatever it is that we're passionate about. But how can we find that, wherever we're at in this modern world of busyness, where maybe we don't have a connection to our place or where we're from, finding that belonging, that connection.
That's such a good question. I wish I were more of an authority to offer. I'm listening to you, I'm like, oh my gosh, I wish I had that childhood. It's so like, I think that the disconnect that we feel with nature, it has ripple effects. It ends up being harmful, and allows us to do things out of this feeling of separateness, things to the environment, things to each other, things to ourselves even. There's another quote from my teacher that I love where he says, it might not be your fault, but it's your responsibility. Who you are, what you've inherited, the stories of, your ancestors, things that have happened, even things that you've done out of how you've been shaped, your conditioning. It might not be your fault, but it is your responsibility to start looking at that. There's this beautiful, again, this author, John O'Donohue, imagery that he uses where he says, we are made of clay, that the earth is the original landscape. It is nature's original children. And then we are born from that. We are clay. And so to feel also with and I didn't grow up in a family that was outdoorsy, like AC was my best friend. I slept in a tent once on my deck with my brother and like came inside in the middle of the night and slept on the couch because I was like, this is terrible. And it wasn't until I moved to New Zealand and experienced a different culture, the Maori culture there, and even the Pākehā, the white people in New Zealand, they have a different relationship to the land that I'd never experienced before. But as you said, not everybody will get the chance to go live in New Zealand for a year. And I kind of wonder as well with the technology, it has expanded our access to 24/7 stimulus, to other lives, to other stories. So I guess what I can offer, I'll bring it back to the story realm since that's at least where I feel like I live. I think we have to be careful what stories we allow to rule our lives in the record player in the background. And for me, there's this constant relating to social media. On the one hand, I love it, and I love the diverse expression that I get to see, the diverse ideas. I love being able to step outside myself and kind of be transported in these ways. At the same time, there can be such a deluge of information that it dilutes my relationship to myself, who I think I am. And I no longer become the architect of my life. I become the reader of other people's lives. And that starts informing my choices that no longer feel like they're inspired by something internal or something greater, and they're instead just reactionary. So I feel like we've expanded our access to tribe, but we haven't deepened our relationships with the people immediately in our lives and ourselves. So we actually feel, greatly dispersed, and our biology is overwhelmed by information in a way that we really weren't designed to process. I can't remember what the statistic is, but it's something like, the human biology was meant to have only so many relationships in our lives. And here we've, opened it up to all of these things that we're sampling from. And so for me, in terms of the greater connectivity, whether it's to the earth, to myself, I think it kind of comes back to the same core thing of the clay matter of my life, who I am inside, where I can rest in a place that feels peaceful and belonging. Could be in nature, it could just be, sitting in my car, whatever it might be. And that to me has this core fundamental element of questioning, what stories am I allowing to infiltrate my life? Do I need to have a greater filter? And, am I being pulled so far in the direction of reactivity that I'm actually not able to take any compassionate action in the world, moving things in a direction that I believe in? And how can that place inside be a place where I can rest because it feels so much like home? And I'll say that, it's hard to find the words for, and I think it's even harder to do. To really figure out this essence of who you are inside, that no matter where you are physically in the world, you can maintain and you can rest there. I feel like I touch on it at times, and other times I don't, and I'm not really sure. And so that's where some of these practices that maybe we've developed, or these communities or these teachers, or things that kind of help us find our road back, however winding it might be, to that core of who we are inside. It's a worthy investigation and a worthy journey to take, because I find for myself, and I wonder if you do as well, the further away I kind of get from myself, the less I'm showing up the way I want to show up in my life. For people around me, for me, for my clients, it infiltrates every area of my life, and it kind of seeps. And so I have to find a way to like suck all that liquid back up and put it back in a bottle and kind of like let it recharge like a dilithium crystal in Star Trek.
Amazing. Yes, absolutely. I agree 100%. What are a few things that you feel like bring you to home? Like simple, maybe rituals that you do or things that you practice that kind of bring you to yourself, bring you present, make you feel safe. What are those to you?
I really love seated meditation, also sometimes called zazen. I know it doesn't work for everybody, and I totally get that. But for me, at the start, it was really hard. I didn't connect to it. It was overwhelming. My thoughts were like a bunch of monkeys having a dance party in my brain and just like, swinging on branches. And I think I've just become more familiar with that over time. So, and I have a very analytical brain. I can read, like, I feel like I just read last night in the book Sapiens by Yuval Noah Harari that the human brain in resting state consumes 25% of our energy. And I was like, what is it like when we're like in working state or like hyper mode state? So for me, just to sit down, I get busy when I'm anxious. I like start washing dishes and I start like organizing my office and moving things around. It's like, just stop the physical activity, sit on that cushion. And sometimes the thoughts are too overwhelming. So what I'll do is I'll actually have more of a dialogue with myself. I will sometimes pay attention to the content of my thoughts and respond to them. And so I can actually address which thoughts are realistic and which thoughts are edged in hysteria, and let them know, I hear you. I see you. That's not what I want to choose to believe right now. And do a little bit of work to let them know, like, I understand where you're coming from, and allowing them to then kind of like, I'm just going to set you right beside me, right here, not far. You're not in the driver's seat, but you're going to be right beside me. I'll put my arm around you. That's how I can kind of de-escalate overwhelming thoughts for myself. I love like candles and incense. So any way I can make it feel like a ritual, and something that sometimes I'll do bows. I kind of like make up my own stuff. I've trained like in Zen, but I like being a little freeform sometimes. Also movement. You mentioned embodiment. I love certainly yoga, but also just dancing. One of my mentors and the person who married us, actually, she once advised to me, like, just put on some music and just dance, and don't make it seem pretty, and don't pretend, like it has to, because I have a dance training background. So it's easy for my body to like go into this must do, toes pointed and fingers extended and all these things. And she's like, just make it ugly and primal and movement and, like whatever you need. And that has been such a useful tool for me, especially if it's like the middle of the day. I can't get out on a hike. It's too much of a commitment. I've got things to do. I'll just put on like a Trevor Hall song and just like jam out, or I'll go out to our garage where we have some workout equipment and pretend I'm working out, but really I'm just dancing in there. Sometimes Adrian comes in, he's like, okay, just walks out. And then similarly to you, nature really does help. So if I like to physically shift my perspective, whether that means lying on the floor or actually flipping upside down. I know that that's not always like feasible, but I think of this is my current perspective. My thoughts are going in this orientation. I'm looking at the same four walls. How can I totally flip this on its head? And I'll try to do something that accomplishes that. And sometimes that's also physically moving somewhere else, going down to the river, dunking in cold water, that kind of like abruptly changing your state in a way that's not harmful, no doctor recommendations here, or getting out on a trail, or even just picking up a river stone and feeling the smoothness of it and thinking of all the water that has crossed that stone to round out its sharp edges. textures, positions. Yeah, those are some of my tools to go to. And then sometimes just eating. I just want chocolate. Thank you very much.
Yes, amazing. I can agree and relate to all of those. Those are all incredibly helpful. Yeah. Tori Washington does some beautiful embodiment practices, and it's just dancing. It's one of the things she says is let your body lead and your mind follow. Let your body lead and your mind follow. So you're moving with your body and then your head's following, and you're moving with your body and then your head's following. And that can be such a great, simple thing just to get out and get back into our bodies. She'll take you down. She'll take you deep into whatever it is, but just like the shadows, and then moving through that and feeling that, and then she'll bring you back out into that celebration and that gratitude and feeling that, and then just coming back home. So whatever it is, just like those creative movement processes are so amazing.
I think that they really help get at something that, at least my experience in society, is that there can be something really constricting about it. I even think about like the types of clothes that I might be drawn to. They can be really restrictive. Sometimes my bra feels really restrictive, or like tight jeans feel really restrictive. And that kind of translates to how we relate to our emotions sometimes, that we think we should be able to have control over them. And I think that actually in the spiritual world can be a trap. That either you believe that you're gonna be so at one with the world and at peace with the world that you're not gonna have divergent emotions that you don't want to have, or you'll be so wise and practiced that you get to control them. That like that right away that you'll abolish that anger. And I think that really does a disservice to my experience of being human. And the movement is something that helps me get beyond that. I love that body move first. And there's even a step further that I would love to add. When I was doing acting training in college, I did psychology and acting. There was this practice that we did. I can't remember who the founder of it was, but they talked about very yogically the energetic body. And before the physical body moves, the energetic body moves. I'm sure we looked like total weirdos to people walking by the classroom, because we were literally just walking around and then like moving and trying to feel where the energetic body was going first, and just kind of touch the edge of that boundary beyond our skin. And I'll think about that sometimes when I'm doing movement of, what does my energetic body want to do right now? How does it want to move? And how can that then be a release or an integration that's beyond words, that's beyond thinking? Especially with grief, to circle back there, we cannot think our way out of grief. I have tried so many times to think, and we can't even necessarily meditate our way out of grief, or practice, have enough tools out of grief. Grief asks us to sit with it. It asks us to be there as much as possible in a loving presence. And movement for me is another great way of relating to my grief. Putting on, and I have a real connection to music, so I'll put on something that really has an emotional resonance with what I'm feeling, and just move to it, to say like, all right, body, all right, spirit, I trust you. I'm here for you. You take over the show. You operate this machine for a little bit, and I'm going to let you work through, whatever you need to work through for as ever long as you need to work through it. I mean, I have to stop dancing at some point and probably go to the bathroom and like eat breakfast, but having, that's another resource that I don't know if we have a lot of a language around connecting with it, that's so valuable, is the wisdom of the body and of the spiritual body, almost as, instead of the soul inhabiting the body, I recently read, what if the body inhabited the soul? What if it was like this orb around this that, you can't escape. You can't escape its worthiness. You can't escape its love. And what if it guided those times when we feel so unsure about what to do next? Where would it take us?
Yes. Oh my God. Amazing. Amazing. I've just gotten so many beautiful golden nuggets and gems. And throughout this conversation, I'm actually going to go back and listen to this, because there's just, again, like same with your writings, there's just layers and layers in there. Like honestly, each little piece, like so many of the words you've said, I feel like we could speak about for an hour or meditate on, or like, I just want to incorporate into my life as an actual practice. So I'm just really, really grateful that we got together today and share, and you let us borrow some of your genius, your unique genius, and your life's embodied experiences, because you are such a teacher and have so much to share in this realm. So thank you. And I'm just really, really grateful.
Thank you, Rita. I am as well. And same to you. I feel like, the first time we met, there was such an inner light that you radiated. You have so much generosity with how you uplift people into the best version of themselves, not for you, but for them. And this liberation that you want people to feel like they can live the life that they want right now. You really unlock potential, and it's such a joy to keep learning from you too, and to feel that radiance wash over me and change my state of being when I need it. So it's such a mutual reflection back and forth. And thank you for having me on for this conversation. What an honor.
Thank you for seeing me.
You're welcome, girl. Always.
Yeah. I love you.
I
And
love you too.
excited to do this again. And I can't keep diving into your book. I'm just like, yeah,
Oh.
loving it. I'm savoring it. So taking it slowly. Yes.
Shameless plug. Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, enjoy the rest of your day, and yeah, enjoy that beautiful Colorado sunshine.
Let's see if we can. Oh, blue skies! So
Ooh!
it is. And the Christmas tree. Well, thank you, friend. Enjoy your day too. And to anybody who watches, so
Yeah.
much love. Life can be so hard. Don't go at it alone. That's why we're here for each other.
Mm-mm. Mwah. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Ciao.